6 teams on a bye. 3 weeks left until the playoffs. The decision-making is going to be crucial this week. Josh and I, as we are each and every week, we have the confidence that we can be here to help you win your Week 12 matchup in fantasy football. Jump in the chat, and let's go have a week. Nope. Wow. What a terrible cold opening. I forgot to find the right thing. All right, let's do this thing.
I need to know everything, who and the what and the where, I need everything. Trust me, I hear what you're saying, but act like it's new what you're telling me. I'm curious, George, I hop in the Porsche, 5 and a horse, I'm ready for war, I'm coming for throats, to turn to a ghost, I need to know everything. Now you be surprised at the info you get is by letting them talk, so I'm letting them talk.
Welcome into Week 12 edition of another damn fantasy podcast. ADP is powered by Bite Size Sports, as we are always on the Bite Size Sports YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button, like our video as we go through, and as always, jump in that chat. We will answer your questions along the way. Josh, how'd Week 11 treat you, and how you feeling this week?
Well, a lot of losses in Week 11, and sometimes that happens. You beat me in the ADP league, and you ruined my 6-game winning streak, but I'm still clinging to the last playoff spot, so that's good. But you beat me fair and square. My issue, I lost in a league by 0.05 points.
Oh, God.
Yep. And it's going to be something that I'll probably annoy everybody tonight with that I talk about, because, we talk about roster moves and lineup decisions and matchups and stuff, and usually it doesn't come down to that close of a margin, but it did. And so, of course, I'm kicking myself for a few decisions that I made or didn't make, and but that's the life of fantasy, I suppose. So
that is.
I'll get over it.
The funny thing is, I mean, playing Taysom Hill at tight end helped me obviously beat you, but the week before was the week that I jumped all over Mike Gesicki, and then we didn't talk last week. I got sick, so we missed last week, so I wasn't even able to talk about it on the show. But that was the week I jumped all over him. I snagged him, so you couldn't take him. And then Tanner Hudson goes off and has a great game. And then Sam Laporta blows up and has a great game. So not that you would have started him over Sam Laporta, but at least I jumped on that grenade for you the week prior just in case.
I appreciate that.
When you went off for like 190 points that week. So, loving the ADP league. Just a real quick rundown. Cookin' Bass is still in the lead. He's not our defending champion, but he was at the top last year too. I am tied with him up at the top. Yep. Dan Portillo, our old co-host, is right there in 3rd place, and you're sitting pretty. Mm-hmm. You are still in the playoffs at 6-5. Again, I mean, this is where we're at right now. Just these last couple weeks, a lot to get through. I call it Byemaggedon. Everybody calls it Byemaggedon on Twitter this week. 6 teams on a bye. Yeah. Some big time names out there on a bye this week. The Falcons and Pitts and Bijan and London. The Bills are on a bye. So you got all those guys. The Bengals, who have been hot offensively, they can't figure out a way to win a game, but they've been hot offensively. Yep. Yeah, they're on a bye this week, so you're missing all those guys.
No Kamara, no Breece Hall, none of those.
No guys. Taysom.
Yeah.
Apparently he's like no Taysom
points. That's why.
And then the Jets and Jaguars guys are also on byes. Not that Breece Hall there, I guess, but Let us know in the chat how your Week 11 went. Didn't look good for Lee, as he says he lost his butt in Week 11.
Sorry, Lee.
Doesn't go well every week. That is the joys of fantasy football. Anything else before we get into our quick reaction?
No, I will talk more about him later, so we don't need to belabor the point right now. But Anthony Richardson with a promising performance, coming back after being sat down. So, I'm sure he'll come up a little bit later as well. So we don't need to delve in now. But that was good to see. Good for him.
He looked good indeed. Thank you all for being here on this fine Wednesday evening. just real quick, next week on Wednesday night, we're going to do our annual Thanksgiving night, Thanksgiving Eve show where we'll invite a bunch of bite-sized guests on. Maybe 6, maybe 8 of us will come on. It'll be a longer show. We'll just talk shop, see how everybody's doing, talk about all the sports. We'll run through the Thanksgiving Day slate. It's going to be an awesome show. So if you're here with us tonight, please come back next week as well. We'll probably start that one a little earlier since it will go late. But it's kind of just a night that we're just hanging out with our friends on Thanksgiving Eve, avoiding cooking, right? Drowning our sorrows of dealing with family the whole next day, whatever it has to be. We're going to have some fun next week. So please join us there with us. Hit that like button and jump in the chat as we go along. We will start with our quick reactions. Josh, where are you at this week?
Yeah, this is a little bit more of a narrow focus, but I'm fully out on the Houston Texans passing attack. The whole offense has been bothersome to me all year. I've always been a big Tank Dell guy, and as soon as I think they're gonna start to really take off, they don't. Get Nico Collins back, and it's still mediocre. I mean, Tank Dell and Nico Collins were wide receivers 42 and 46 this past week, so not even startable worthy. And it's more than just it's more than just matchup. It's more than just bad luck. CJ Stroud is getting pressured a ton. Their offensive line is allowing a little bit, way too much pressure. And some of the open passes he has are just kind of off. They're not in sync right now. I think Stroud's probably going through growing pains, and he's only his second year in the NFL. So I'm not out on any of the Texans players forever long term, but for the time being, I'm really out on their pass catchers. Now, Joe Mixon, of course, is having a great fantasy season. He's getting it feels like he's getting every single carry or target in the red zone or within the 5-yard line. And so I think that's another reason why
he's going off, man.
Yeah. And I think it's another reason why their pass catchers are so unappealing to me is because they just seem to be feeding Joe Mixon, and it's negating all the relevance for all the other guys. And so as a staunch Tank Dell guy, I'm very focused on the Texans every week, and right now I'm just completely out on their passing attack until something changes. They have the Titans this weekend, who have a tough running back matchup, but I still feel like they're going to pound it to Mixon. They're going to win with defense. They're going to create turnovers. They're going to manage the game, and they'll probably beat the Titans, but I'm still not expecting any sort of prolific passing output from the Texans. So,
yeah, I would expect something similar to what we just saw against the Cowboys, right? Lean on that defense and run game. I'm going to talk about CJ Stroud in our start-sit columns, our start-sit segments. Spoiler alert, he's my sit of the week. He's a guy that's drafted fifth quarterback, sixth quarterback off the board. He's kind of been somewhat of a bust. But you got Jaguars, Dolphins after this Titans team, but it doesn't get – then you got the Chiefs in the first week of the playoffs. So it's not necessarily going to be all roses and sunshine for Houston moving forward either. My quick reaction to this week is I just like – we got some healthy wide receivers back, and I'm so bummed that we didn't get some of these guys healthy all season. Just the Rams duo and Puka and Cooper Kupp, and then the Bengals duo with Chase and Higgins. Higgins came back scorching hot on Sunday night. Oh, yeah. All 4 of these guys are within the top 6 of the fantasy wide receivers from last week. So it's just – we lose Chris Godwin, and Mike Evans has been out, and Tyreek hasn't had a quarterback. And it was a great reminder that we were probably directionally right by drafting all these wide receivers really high because they have huge ceilings. They're going to win you weeks if they're healthy and if their quarterbacks are healthy. Unfortunately, we've just had so many injuries this year that it's been a tough season, but it was just really nice to see these guys show up and show out last week of drafting Puka in the top of the second round actually wasn't wrong. Right. Yeah, we lost him for a couple weeks, but he showed us why it wasn't wrong, right? Drafting T. Higgins in the 3rd or 4th round wasn't wrong. He just hasn't been healthy. So that's kind of, as I was watching those games, like, man, what if these guys were healthy all season?
Right. And that's the toughest part, is that you can't, like, certain guys, like, you see them have certain injuries or they seem to be more injury prone. So you want to kind of take that into account, but at the same time you can't, right? Because just when you think a guy is going to be hurt perpetually, he stabilizes and he's the elite fantasy producer that he is. And there's so many injuries every week that you really can't factor that in too much into your drafting decisions, unless it's like they're going to miss 10 weeks, right? Or something drastic. Otherwise, you kind of just have to roll with it. So yeah, it is good to see some of those heavy hitters actually hitting and validating where we drafted them, where we ranked them at the beginning of the season.
I mean, it's the other side of the coin, right? Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley are just old, but actually they're not, right? Now they're continuing to dominate. So we get it on both sides. That was our quick reaction from week 11. Let's talk about our biggest wins from week 11. And I'm just going to go right back to T. Higgins. I actually ended up starting him pretty well everywhere I had him. It definitely could have been a situation where you don't feel comfortable. Maybe you don't want to do it. Don't start him immediately. But I actually had to do that. In a couple leagues, he was essentially my only or my best option. So I just went ahead and threw him in there, and that was awesome. So for me, that was my biggest win of the week, of just going back and trusting the guy that you drafted at a high draft pick, even when his first week back from being injured.
Yep, for sure. My biggest win is Justin Herbert. I mean, we started the year, everyone, the narrative on him is since his rookie year, he hasn't really been prolific as a passer, not really fantasy relevant for the past couple of years, honestly. And then, Harbaugh comes in, it's all about running. It's about defense. They have a good run game. They have good defense. And they had a pretty easy start to the season schedule wise, but he has some really nice matchups heading into the fantasy playoffs, and he really showed out last week. The league I started him in, it's 1 point every 20 passing yards. So he had almost 30 points for me, and that was a really big boost for me. And I'm glad I stuck with him, because I think talent-wise, he's one of the best in the league. Just fantasy's never really taken that step. So he's it's good to see Herbert doing well, and he was my biggest win because I was trusting him over some other more sketchy options. So
yeah, big game Monday Night Football this week. It's going to be an awesome game.
Oh yeah,
very fun to watch. Going to be plenty of opportunities for fireworks in that game against the Ravens. Both teams are 6-3. What are they? 7-3. 7-3. Both teams are 7-3.
Yep.
So that'll be a big game there. And I've always thought Herbert was a really good quarterback. They've just never really. Either he didn't have the wide receivers or he didn't have the offensive line. And then this year it's like, well, they're going to be run heavy, which they were for like the first 3 weeks. But, man, they have really let it rip the last couple weeks, and that's been a lot of fun. Latin McConkey, Quentin Johnston looking good finally. Yeah. Will Disley, the old Seattle Seahawks, he'd show up every once in a while. Now he's like the tight end one on the Chargers, so that's kind of fun for them. Before we get there, so John, it's Byemaggedon, man. Burrow, Chase, Cook, and Drake London on a bye this week. That's what we're here for. That's what we're here for this week, is really to kind of help answer some of these questions that you might have, because you're going to be put in a lot of tough situations for start sits in week 12. Lee, I know you've thrown some start sits out there. We will get to those here momentarily. But first, let's talk about our biggest loss of the week.
Yeah, I could start because that was a good segue. I was trying to pick up Will Disley everywhere. And for some reason, this is again the league where I lost by 0.05, I decided that Dawson Knox was going to come to play with Dalton Kincaid out. And I started Dawson Knox.
I feel like I probably would have been the same way. Dawson Knox should have had a great game. That's where you beat the Chiefs.
Right. I had a feeling. And he had a nice, cute 8 points. And meanwhile, Will Disley scores his first touchdown of the year. He's been good without touchdowns dependency as well. And then he also gets in the end zone. So I lost that one. And then I have to throw this other loss in there because, I trusted Sean Payton or not Sean Payton. And I kind of got on the Audric Estime train for a little bit and started him as a flex instead of Xavier Worthy, who also had a gut instinct that he was going to do something against the Bills. The Chiefs were going to need him against the Bills, and those are in a couple different leagues there, but still just just moves I'm kicking myself on still after losing last week.
I just don't understand the estimate stuff. I assume, and they'll maybe never come out and say it, but I assume Javonte must have been punished in week 10. Only less than 30% of the snaps. Estimate gets 45% of the snaps. Everybody's like, oh, this is Estimate's backfield. They're going to make the change of the guard. And Javonte has 52% of the snap share the next week. I don't really understand what was going on there. Estimate with 14 carries in week 10, just 6 in week 11. Javonte, 3 touches in week 10. He still only has 13 touches. It's not like they got a great amount of volume there in Denver. McLaughlin's still getting a few touches here and there, but I don't know. That was weird. Yeah. My option is just Javonte was in the doghouse or injured or something was going on.
Yeah, who knows? It's just a cautionary tale for people. Watch out for gut knee-jerk reactions. But again, during all these bye weeks, someone like Estimate starts to look really appealing after the waiver wire for last week, and so you can be easily tempted. You just got to be careful, or hopefully you get lucky. So,
my biggest loss of week 11, in one of my leagues, I had lost by 6 points. It's like, oh, great, good game. You tried, except for I started Kyle Pitts and not Taysom Hill. That was a 43-point difference in that league. So that kind of sucked. that hurt, man. I'm like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I didn't start Taysom in this league. Not that I felt like I should have. Like, I thought Kyle Pitts was in a fine spot. Denver's defense is really good, but Kyle Pitts still has a little bit of a ceiling he's shown this year. And as soon as I saw that ticker come across that said Taysom Hill 75-yard touchdown, I knew I was dusted on that choice. So
that's tough. But I mean, no one, even the biggest Taysom Hill fan, didn't predict a 40 burger on Sunday.
Yeah.
So.
you live it, you learn. Before we get to some NFL news, let's knock out some of these start-sit questions here in the chat. And if anybody else has any, just go ahead and feel free to throw them in as we go. We will stop and talk about them on occasion. Lee says, Tyler Lockett or DeAndre Swift in his flex? I'll let you start.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Swift here. I'm not super excited about Swift against my Vikings, but Jackson Smith and Jigba has really kind of been emerging. DK Metcalf is still there. Lockett's past few weeks, there's not a lot of volume, not a lot of target volume there. And so I think even in a rough matchup for DeAndre Swift, I'm going to lean where there's going to be more consistent volume. He's going to get carries. And, because now I said that the Vikings have a good chance of stopping Swift, he'll probably score on us. That's just how life works. But I'm going to go with the volume floor here with Swift.
Yeah, I would agree with that. He catches some passes out of the backfield. They run some screens and stuff to him as well. They did start utilizing Roschon Johnson in between the tackles a little bit more. I was watching that game a little bit and noticed that they were definitely running him in the tackles, but they're still getting Swift on the outside and on the edge. And that's where the big plays usually come from. It's getting outside the tackle. So I think you just have a higher ceiling there for Swift as well. Tyrone Tracy or Jacobs in a league here. Josh Jacobs coming off a pretty solid game this past week. I'm not even sure I know. I know who the Giants are playing. The Packers have a big game this week, right?
They have the Niners.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. I'm not really that scared of the Niners defense. They are injured, man. They are very, very injured. Yeah. I think I just got to lean on the star with Josh Jacobs right now. I know Tyrone Tracy's your boy, our boy. I think I would still take Jacobs though in this one.
Yeah, I think he's definitely the safer pick. I think conventional wisdom would say Josh Jacobs. The Giants are starting Tommy DeVito. If you think I'm not convinced he had some fun moments last year. I'm not fully convinced he's going to take this offense to the next level. I do really like Tracy's volume, and I love Tyrone Tracy. I'm still starting him in some leagues against the Bucs. I think he'll still put up some numbers for you, but if you want a safer floor, I think conventional wisdom would say Josh Jacobs here, even though it's against the Niners. It is at home at Lambeau, so it should be a fun battle. But and the Packers are better against the Niners in the regular season than the playoffs. We know that. So,
well, Charbonnet or Alexander Madison. This is just gross.
This is rough. This is Byemaggedon at its finest.
I know. And these are the ones that we're probably going to run into a little bit more often this week. For me, I can't find a world that I'm going to be very comfortable throwing out Alexander Madison against the Denver Broncos defense. Yeah. And the Raiders are just essentially their season's dead. It's not going to feel good at all. I would almost just take Charbonnet just for the sheer fact, like, I don't think the Raiders are going to be able to do anything at all against this Broncos defense.
Yeah. Yep. I'm going Charbonnet as well. I mean, obviously he's second fiddle to Ken Walker, but he's the only other fiddle there, and he's going to get some carries. He won't get a ton of touches, but he's going to get some carries. He gets some passes. Whereas Madison and Zamir White seem to be interchanging who's worse, who's better. And then all of a sudden Amir Abdullah comes in and gets the touchdown last week. So there's a third guy there as well in a game where, like you said, this could easily be a 15-8 win for the Broncos and not a ton of not a ton of running back. You can also
break the tie just with the total, right? Like I am working on the assumption Seattle, Arizona gets a little bit of back and forth. They both offenses move slowly, but I do think they could have a little back and forth. So I would work under the assumption that game probably 45 to 50 points versus Broncos Raiders that will be lucky to get to 30 points. So that's always a decent tiebreaker for you. And then last start sit question for now.
Excuse me.
Oh no, 2 start sits. Odunze or Pearsall. Odunze or who's Chicago playing? I kind of like Pearsall.
Chicago's got the Vikes in Chicago.
You do have to throw if you're going to move the ball against Chicago or against Minnesota. But Pearsall didn't really do much last week, so I'll lean Odunze this week.
Yeah, Pearsall only had 2 targets last week. I think the Packers defense is
Jennings a stud.
Yeah, Jennings is like
why did they pay Brandon Ayuk, man? I mean, come on. Just should trade him away. Let somebody else pay him.
Yeah, I'm going to go Doomsday there as well.
Big Brandon Ayuk Jr. right there. All right. John says, I need one of these 3. Jerome Ford, Tajay Spears, Gus Edwards revenge game. It's everybody's revenge game on the Chargers. Gus, J.K. Dobbins, the offensive coordinator,
Greg Roman,
the Harbaugh Bowl. It's there's all over that one. To me, this is Jerome Ford though. Okay. Tomorrow night, catching passes, trying to do anything and everything they can against this Steelers defense. That's who I would take.
Yep, I think that's a fair point. I kind of like how Gus Bus has looked this year since coming back. He looks pretty spry. He looks pretty fresh. You're worried about how many touches though. Tajay Spears is in concussion protocol, and it's leaning towards he won't be in Monday night. I know they have they play on Sunday. Never mind, I was thinking of the wrong team. But I'm avoiding Tajay Spears because I don't know if he's going to come through that, and they have the Texans, so that's going to be a tough game for him and Pollard to be successful. So I like how Gus Edwards looked. I think Jerome Ford's probably the best option there for sure.
Yeah, Baltimore, you can't really run on them too often. I mean, you got to really throw against Baltimore. So we'll see there. And then White Boy Rick, what's up, man? Thank you for being here. He says he has a trade offer, sending him Tyrone Tracy for Neighbors. For me, sending Tracy for Neighbors. Okay, so you're getting Malik Neighbors. I mean, I would take Neighbors. I think Neighbors is one of these wide receivers that are not – it's not going to matter whose quarterback is, right? Not that I want to compare him to like CeeDee Lamb, but CeeDee Lamb's still getting his right now, right? They're going to target CeeDee Lamb. They're going to target Malik Neighbors. I think Tommy DeVito is going to sling it around the field. He's going to throw interceptions, but he's going to throw the ball a lot. I still like Malik Neighbors and that upside.
Yeah, as much as Tyrone Tracy is my guy forever after this season, especially if this is PPR, I'm still going Neighbors here. That talent you can't pass up. And if you still have your trade deadline, that's pretty nice. So that's good. I think it's a good way to do it. And DeVito's done enough to show that he can get the ball to the top playmakers. Not perfectly, but he should be able to get, if Neighbors gets his 10 targets, he should have a good week for you. So
yeah, great segue into our news segment, as our first one was just to talk about Tommy DeVito and Daniel Jones's bench and how that would affect Neighbors. I think we both kind of laid out what we thought there. Mm-hmm. Neighbors should be fine. Gabe Davis probably weren't necessarily starting him week to week, but he's always been kind of a fantasy option. He will be out for the season. I saw when he went down, I was watching that game, and it just did not look good from the beginning, but he will be out for the season. But for better news, and we'll go quick news segment today, Mike Evans back in practice. So this is huge, I think, for both Baker Mayfield getting back into streaming quarterback options, and obviously huge for Mike Evans as we come down the stretch here. Because now you're not really competing with anybody. None of these guys really took off over the last 3 to 4 weeks like we wanted them to. So you're not really competing with anyone, and you get the Giants your first game back. If he is active this week, I'm putting Mike Evans right back in my starting lineup. Would you do the same, or would you wait a week?
Yeah, Mike Evans is one of those guys where even if you're a little bit nervous, if he's playing, you're starting him, right? And he's a guy. He's proven his toughness for his whole career. So if he's in, that means he thinks he can do it, which means he'll tough it out and get you the points. And I think it's good news for Baker Mayfield. And they get a nice matchup with the Giants for him if he comes back this week. So,
and then a couple of guys in concussion protocol. You already mentioned Tajay Spears leaning towards not being able to play, and then Jake Ferguson. I think Jake Ferguson is a little bit interesting. Not because of him himself, but these tight ends were involved in the game after he went out.
Yep. I went up against Ferguson in a league, and I was real nervous at the start of Monday Night Football because Cooper Rush was fine and he had a couple early targets. And then of course, unfortunately, he goes out with injury, but you can definitely see he's going to be a safety valve for Cooper Rush. So if you need a tight end, a streaming option, or just for bye week stuff here as you try to get towards the playoffs, Jake Ferguson's not a terrible option. I don't think the Cowboys offense is going to light anything up, but they're going to get some yards, and he's going to be a part of that. So,
and if he's out, Luke Schoonmaker puts up double-digit points last week, and Brevin Spanford was all over the field.
Minnesota
felt like he was getting a catch every other play. Puts up over 8 PPR points last week. I'm not saying that they're going to be guys that you should be drooling over, but if Jake Ferguson does miss and you're in a tight spot, no Pitts, no Taysom Hill, no Dalton Kincaid, could look at those Dallas guys and could be an option for you out there.
Yep.
All right, let's get into our panic or patience segment for week 12. Starting off at quarterback, as we always do, Jaden Daniels. Yes, the rookie sensation has made it on our panic or patience list, which is usually never a good thing.
No.
Quarterback 24, 2 straight weeks. 3 of his last 5 games, he's scored less than 15 fantasy points.
Yep.
How are we feeling about Jaden Daniels, the star of the first 5 weeks?
Yeah, it hurts because I'm in panic mode just for this moment in fantasy. I'm going to put a caveat there. I still think Jaden Daniels is legit. I've loved what I've seen from him so far. I think this is the growing pains time for his rookie season, though. We were talking some of the other, like Simon, some of the Ben, some of the other guys over at Bite Size, talking about the Commanders did not do anything to address the offensive line in the draft, and their left tackle is always going to be an issue. And PFF still somehow has them as like the 5th best offensive line, but their rookie left tackle gave up like 7 pressures alone last week. And, their schedule has started to creep or to get a little bit more difficult after their hot start. So I think they have tough games. I think they have some offensive line issues. And while I think Jaden Daniels is going to be great, I think he's going to have to go through some lumps at this point of the season. So for fantasy purposes, I'm definitely in panic mode, more so than patient mode.
Yeah, I'm also in panic mode. I think he should be fighting against Dallas, but Dallas just gave up a ton on the ground to Houston. So I wouldn't be surprised if, Brian Robinson Jr. just got a lot of run this week instead of having Daniels air it out. This goes back. I mean, even back to that Chicago game, they kind of held him in check until the Hail Mary, right? And so there's you see a lot of these defenses are starting to kind of figure it out, right? And so you don't want to overthink it, but next week they play a tough Tennessee team. Then they get a week 14 bye. And so now you're starting to think like, okay, the next 3 weeks doesn't really look that promising either. Right. And if you're in a position where you need to win, I wouldn't feel good about starting Jaden Daniels next week. And then obviously you're not going to be starting him in week 14. The semifinals, you do make it to the playoffs. You make it to the semifinals. You got Jaden Daniels. He plays the same Eagles team that just held him in check last week. So again, there's just not a lot in the future that makes you feel like, okay, I can start this guy. He's going to get back to that running all over the field, throwing all over the field type of game plan. I think they're going to kind of continue to slow it down a little bit, run the ball a little bit more, utilize Austin Eckler even more than they've been using him. Now, even with Brian Robinson back, continue to utilize him. So, yeah, I think that trade deadline is probably passed. But if it's not, this could be an opportunity for you to trade high, get rid of the name. He's had a great season, and maybe either get a better running back or wide receiver, and stream quarterbacks the next couple weeks. You can definitely win fantasy football with just streaming quarterbacks if you so choose. Again, most trade deadlines are passed, but if you have that opportunity, I would not mind trading a guy like Jaden Daniels at this time. We will talk about Jonnu here in a minute, and we'll talk about Eckler and Robinson here in a minute. So I'll answer those here before too long. Aaron Jones, your guy, RB 37 on the week. Aaron Jones has not been in the top 12 for running back since week 7. He's only got 3 total touchdowns on the year. He's not catching the balls he was early in the season. There's a very clear change of pass catching for Aaron Jones. Cam Akers cutting into his workload now. Josh, I'm in panic mode for Aaron Jones. I feel like he's a guy that you feel like you got to be starting each and every week. You're just putting him in your lineup and not really thinking about it. He's projecting for double-digit points every week, right? You see it on your fantasy apps. You've got to put him in your lineup, but he continues to fail us. What's going on in Minnesota? And is there optimism for Aaron Jones down the road?
Yeah, it's tough because this is kind of how I expected the beginning of the season to go. Last year we saw him battle injury the whole year, and then for the Packers, they're down the stretch, he was just lights out, 100-yard games for like 3 or 4 weeks in a row. And then he started this season off really, really hot, and then had some injuries battle here and there. So I think the eating into his touches is kind of a real thing, whether it's Akers or maybe Ty Chandler here and there. Cam Akers did vulture a touchdown last week against the Titans. He got the red zone target there. So you're definitely in panic mode, but at the same time, I don't know if you can bench him. Like you brought it up, like this is the tough spot with Aaron Jones. Like he's really hard to bench. I mean, I'm picturing if you have 3 running backs and you're not as affected by the bye weeks somehow, and he could potentially be more of your flex RB3 type range, I think you could justify trying to put in somebody who's got a little bit more upside. But if he's your RB2, you got to roll with him, honestly, because he's, the Bears are giving up 4.8 yards per rush. There should be points to be had in this game, even though it's a divisional battle. But I'm definitely in panic mode too, from a fantasy standpoint, because he has not produced. He's not produced the level that we thought he was, or the level that he started the season at. So definitely some worry. I think it's really hard to sit him. And Akers only had 5 less carries than him last week, so he definitely got some run. And that was a tough matchup too against the Titans. So we'll see how it looks in Chicago. But I'm definitely panicking, but that's not necessarily benching. So I don't know. I don't even feel like I'm answering your question very well.
I think that's what we're all. That's literally the situation we're all in, right?
Mhm.
It's like he's projected right now. I looked it up while you're talking on ESPN for 14.7 points this week.
Right.
When you're going when the average Joe is setting our lineups, wherever we're at in the morning, we're drinking our coffee, maybe we're in the bathroom, wherever we're at, setting our lineups.
Right.
We look and it says 14.7. I'm like, shit, I can't put Austin Eckler at 8.6 over Aaron Jones. It's Aaron Jones. So I think that's where we're all out. And I think it is it's a tough situation. I wish that we had better. I played Aaron Jones in DFS a couple weeks ago. He had super great price and he failed us. It's just it's kind of been frustrating if you have Aaron Jones on your team.
Yeah.
Which I think is why we're in panic mode.
Right.
But I also think that it's especially on a week like this, Byemaggedon, we got all these running backs off. Like there's probably no way we're setting him.
Yeah, you'd feel a lot better. I think you mentioned at the start when you started talking about Aaron Jones that, he hasn't had more than 4 targets since like week 4 or something like that. And so I think you'd feel a lot better if he'd had 3 or 4 catches pretty consistently. Because against the Jags, he actually averaged over 5 yards a carry. He had a good rushing game against the Jags. He just hasn't found the end zone as much. And, the Cam Akers stuff is concerning from a fantasy standpoint as well. So, it's a tough situation.
I would say at this point you're still just going to start him. Like I don't see any, especially this week. I don't really see any way you can't start him. Moving on to wide receiver. Excuse me. One of my favorite non-Chiefs players in the NFL. Love the way this guy plays. Love having him on fantasy football in the past. This year, not as much. Deebo Samuel, wide receiver 57 in week 11. Juwan Jennings filling in very nicely for Brandon Ayuk, as we mentioned earlier.
Yep.
But this week, you didn't have Brandon Ayuk. You don't have George Kittle. It's supposed to be the golden age for Deebo. Without Kittle, without Ayuk in the past, these have been like the ceiling games. These are the ones he really goes off. And he ends up wide receiver 57. Are you panicking yet?
Yeah, absolutely. Because one of the appeals to Deebo for the past few years has been his rushing upside. He's been that unique player that's getting a nice amount of carries. He hasn't ran for over 20 yards since week 1, right? And so those rushing yards and those big plays out of the running game were kind of what helped elevate his floor a little bit, even when all the other weapons were there. And then to factor what you just said, all these guys are out and he's still not taking over, and Juwan Jennings and Brock Purdy seem to have this rapport that's, you can't destroy or something. So it's not the same Deebo. It's not where you picked him to, or where you drafted him to be. And so, I mean, he's hard to justify even as a flex at this point, but that's where I'd put him at. Maybe low end wide receiver 3 flex range is about where I'd feel comfortable if I have to put him in my starting lineup.
Yeah, I'm in full agreement. I had written down you're just not getting those explosive plays. Exactly what you just said. Yep. We're not seeing that. We're not seeing this, 60-yard screen passes, those kind of things. And I'm getting slightly concerned, like from a dynasty standpoint, that he's just slowing down a little bit.
Yeah.
Right. Big bodied, just runs meaner than heck.
Yep.
And I just have a concern that he might be slowing down a little bit. He's most definitely not the first nor the second read, it seems like, for Brock Purdy. And in the past, he used to be like the first read or the second read. And so something's off there with Deebo for sure.
Well, and he's to your point about losing a step. I mean, he's battled injuries most of his seasons as well. Not drastic ones necessarily, but he's missed a few weeks here, a few weeks there. And you just wonder if, he's taken a beating to the point where it's hard to see him getting back to that level. So,
yeah, that's a really good point. All right, tight end. We'll get through this and we will answer some more start sit questions. So keep them coming if you will. We appreciate that. Tucker Kraft. Here's a guy that probably 3, 4, 5 weeks ago, we were talking about either start of the week or are we going to party or pass on this guy? Now we're talking about him in the panic or be patient segment because it hasn't looked good. And now, if we're looking at ESPN or NFL.com, whatever, you look at some rankings out there, he's kind of low tier. What are we thinking about with Tucker Kraft? I would say I'm panicked, but for me, it's a little different because I've never really fully bought in with Tucker Kraft, and I also don't have him on any team anywhere, and so I'm not even relying on him. But I do know that the listeners out there may be relying on this guy, so I want to hear your thoughts on panic or patience.
Yeah, I put him at a panic as well. I don't have a lot of him. I don't think I have him anywhere, honestly, either, now that I think about it. Excuse me. But he's ranked as a top 12 tight end this week again. But I look back his past 3 weeks, if he doesn't have a 67-yard touchdown against Jacksonville, he has very minimal output for the past 3 weeks in PPR leagues. And then I look ahead and he's got the Niners this week, good against tight Seattle. Teams that are at least good to above average against tight ends for the most part from a fantasy standpoint. And so this guy, I'm with you. He wasn't like an elite one at the beginning, but after a few weeks, we were like, okay, maybe this is a top 5 tight end. Like maybe he's in that tier right after Bowers, McBride, and Kelsey and some of those guys. And so he was kind of flirting with that elite status. But then I just checked, the other day and I'm saying, wow, he's really struggled. So
yeah.
So I'm a little bit in panic mode. I think his matchups coming up are tough as he get to the playoffs. And, he hasn't done what he kind of was, seems like it was a flash in the pan. So I'm panicking a little bit here with Tucker Kraft.
100%. All right, let's check the chat here. Yeah, Lee, we are all scraping the bottom of the barrel this week, especially with all the buys that's going on. Lee had asked earlier, Jonnu Smith over Ferguson, if they both play. I'm all in on this. We are going to talk about Jonnu Smith here in the next segment. But yes, I'm probably playing Jonnu Smith over not every tight end, obviously, but quite a bit of them this week.
Yep, me too.
He also asked Robinson or Eckler, which is best this week. Do you have anything at the top of your mind on this one?
I mean, volume's the best one, and Eckler's had a nice few weeks, but the last week he had like 8 catches, and that's kind of an anomaly so far this year. Some of his other good weeks were pretty much touchdown dependent ones. So unless there's some news that Robinson's dinged up a little bit or he's not fully healthy, I'm probably leaning Robinson Jr. with the volume play here against Dallas. That said, we're all scraping the barrel, and if you're in a PPR league and you think that last week's 8 catches from Eckler is a sign of things to come as Daniel starts to navigate things getting a little bit harder and he starts checking down more. I mean, I think there's a world in which that's the better play, but
yeah.
For me, I think based on Robinson Jr.'s track record this year, I'm gonna lean that direction. So
yeah, we're gonna talk about Eckler as well here very momentarily, but I would also side with, in this very instance of just Robinson versus Eckler, I would side with Robinson. They gave this guy 16 carries after he missed 2 straight weeks to injury. And they gave it's like right back to him. Here's 16 more carries. So to me, they're not really, he must have been healthy, right? Coming into last week. They believed he was healthy. They gave him the rock. And now Joe Mixon just shredded this defense. You don't think that Brian Robinson can't put up, 95 and a touchdown if he gets 16 carries?
Yep.
So yeah, I like Brian Robinson there over Austin Eckler. And then White Boy Rick here asking Vikings or Broncos defense this week. I want to hear your take on this. Obviously, as the resident Vikings fan going to Chicago, are you worried about the defense? Would you play them in fantasy, or would you rather go Denver?
This is a tougher one than I want it to be. My gut wants me to say, Vikings can take care of business. Chicago's floundering. They have so many offensive line issues that if you get points for sacks, which I think most DSTs do, that should be, I feel like the Vikings should get a handful of sacks, probably a couple turnovers. What you're worried about with the Vikings defense, and why I think we had the Odunze pick earlier, is in the Flores defense, you're going to get some D-backs on an island. You're probably going to give up some big plays. I mean, the Vikings, honestly, last week got kind of lucky in some calls against the Titans. Calvin Ridley had a 51-yard touchdown call back, and he was wide open. Like, our defense is good, but we are prone to giving up big plays. So from a complete shutdown standpoint, I would lean the Broncos here. I mean, they're going up against the Raiders, who are also terrible. And I think, the Bears, even though they've struggled, Caleb Williams is still, the talent that could make turn something out of nothing, make a big play out of nothing, and raise the point total, unfortunately, against us. I feel confident in my Vikes, but I think the safer bet is Broncos Raiders. That Broncos D can really shut them down. I think both defenses will put up points, though, honestly.
I think Denver definitely keeps Las Vegas to scoring less than Chicago against the Vikings. But I think I actually lean towards the Vikings, and the reason is I guess contradictory, like exactly what you said. Like, Caleb's going to continue to push and push. The Bears are not dead. The Vegas is dead. Like, this team is the team is dead to the water. Like, they're playing for absolutely nothing. I could see that game being over in 2 hours and just Javonte Williams ran the ball 30 times or whatever.
Yeah.
The Broncos run the ball 30 times and through their 3 running backs and also, add in Bo Nix in there. And this game's over in a hurry, and the defense doesn't have opportunities to make plays. Yeah. Whereas I think Chicago is going to try to push with Minnesota. You beat Minnesota by throwing against them. They're going to try to throw against them. That leads to sacks. That leads to interceptions, maybe pick 6, something like that. So I just think there'll be more opportunity for Minnesota to make those big plays than for Denver. So that's why I would lean Minnesota over Denver this week.
Yeah.
But again,
makes sense.
They're both good plays. Like, I don't know if you can go wrong either way. They could both end up with just a measly 8 points, and you're just like, okay, whatever. It's just defense, right?
Yep.
All right, let's keep moving and get to our party or pass segment of the week. You knew I had to throw my guy, Anthony Richardson, on here. His first game back after being benched, and he goes off for quarterback 4 in fantasy football this week. He had his best completion percentage of the year, throws for 272 yards, gets a touchdown through the air, runs in 2 scores with 32 yards, just a really solid outing. And the Colts won, so that helped too, but really solid outing for Anthony Richardson. You got to be excited about what's going on in Indianapolis, but I'm going to pass. From a fantasy perspective, right? Like, right now we have 3 weeks until the playoffs, and then you have 3 weeks of the playoffs, right? So we're thinking we're playing a 6-week game at this point.
Yep.
Really doesn't matter where you're at right now, whether you're 4-7 or 7-4. That kind of doesn't matter, because the next 3 weeks are the most crucial. So you make it into the playoffs, and then you're playing another 3-week game after that, right? Yep. I don't really think Anthony Richardson's going to give you a chance to win if you're playing him in fantasy football. They've got a lot of tough defenses here down the stretch coming for him. He's still going to be inconsistent. I think he's going to be good. I really think he's going to be good. I really hope he's the real deal. I'm just not ready to trust him in fantasy football right now.
Yep. 100%. I want to say party so much right now, but I'm going to say pass and avoid that knee-jerk reaction that I've had so many times in fantasy. I'm sure we can all relate to. And it's a perfect example. This season, I started Anthony Richardson. If you started him in week 1, he had over 30 points. He had mid-30s in my in the league I have him in. And I was like, here we go. I can set and forget Anthony Richardson, rushing quarterback, upside, feeling great. He didn't get anywhere near anything good for a while after that. Some 11-point games, some 15-point games. And so as awesome as it was to see him come out of being benched with a respectable completion percentage, with 2 rushing touchdowns, a decent amount of yards, super exciting to see that. But we have to see if he can do it respectably against those matchups you mentioned. They have Detroit this week. If he gets 25 fantasy points and looks poised and has a good completion percentage, maybe he just gets 1 rushing touchdown. If he's respectable against Detroit, I might consider him in some leagues going into the playoffs, just with the rushing upside. If I feel like I'm taking that risk, but for now, yeah, you have to pass still. He has to see it again. Great for him. Hopefully he has to turn the corner, but it's too early to party, considering everything that's happened in Indianapolis.
Lee, AR Express, baby.
Nice.
He's
I
on
love the
AR
confidence,
Express.
Lee, and you might be riding a 40 burger from your quarterback this week. You never know with him.
That's right. Maybe be paid off handsomely. I hope he's. I obviously have been Richardson stands. I've talked about him a lot. I took him 101 in dynasty drafts and rookie drafts a year ago. Over, I don't remember who was the rookies that year. Whatever. But I took him 101. Oh, I guess CJ Stroud and Bryce Young, right? He's the same year as them. So I've always been on. I took his MVP ticket coming into this year. Really expect him to take a step forward. So hopefully this benching helps him from that perspective. But again, I think we are in agreement with passing on him from fantasy over the next 6 weeks. Austin Eckler. This one's a little bit interesting here. 3 straight games with over 17 PPR points. The first 2 were without Brian Robinson. Brian Robinson comes back last week, and as you alluded to, Eckler still got 8 catches, you said?
Yeah, like 8 catches.
That was a little bit surprising to me. Is this sticky here? Do you want to party or pass here with Eckler having a good game even after Robinson come back?
I'm passing him, but I'll say with a caveat that I would if I had him in a certain place, I would consider starting him this week against Dallas. I think that there's a path to success for him against Dallas, and if those receptions and targets are a thing to stay and something with consistency, obviously he's going to be a great play in PPR league. So I'm considering him this week, but beyond that, I think they have the Titans after that. I'm not feeling great about Eckler going forward, assuming, of course, Brian Robinson's healthy and does what he's supposed to do. So,
yeah, I think that if we learned anything over the last couple weeks, if you have Brian Robinson and you are you're leaning on Robinson down the stretch, you got to find a way to get Austin Eckler on your team. Mm-hmm. Because when Robinson went out, Eckler 11 carries, 13 carries.
Yep.
But last week, Eckler only has 2 carries. I think that really shows us how they're going to use Eckler even moving forward. Yep. He is strictly the pass catching back there. I think this week, as you mentioned, he definitely could play him if you needed to. It is a bye week. So there's a lot of buys this week, so you might have to do that. Right. But we talked about Jaden Daniels earlier and just kind of the schedule they have coming up with Tennessee and then a week 14 bye. And you're kind of just all those same things come into play with Austin Eckler and really even with Brian Robinson, although you're starting him week to week, I would assume. But with Eckler being kind of that pass catching back, I don't necessarily think that he's going to end up being any type of league winner for you down the stretch. So I will also be passing. But maybe this guy will be a league winner. Jerry Jeudy, wide receiver 5 in week 11. And if we think back last year, there's some guys who came on at the end of the season that we weren't necessarily expecting to come on at the end of the season. And they help you go on and win your fantasy championships. Jerry Jeudy is a guy we've been waiting on for what feels like a very long time. I think he was a 2020 draft pick.
Mm-hmm.
It's just every single year. Then Sean Payton comes in. We're like, oh, this is going to be a year. Now he's traded. This is it's been a long time coming.
Yep.
But man, in week 11, he had his 3rd straight double-digit game. So not 3rd straight week because they had a bye in there, but 3 straight games, since Amari Cooper's been traded, since Jameis Winston has started being the quarterback. Everybody continues to talk about Cedric Tillman. Everybody keeps wanting to chase Elijah Moore, but it's Jerry Jeudy who shows up in the top 5. I'm here to party. At least 5 catches and 70 yards in all 3 of those games. He does have 4 tough weeks coming up. Very tough defenses, twice against Pittsburgh. I think they've got the Chiefs coming up. Who was there was another, maybe the Eagles. There was another defense that's pretty decent coming up for the Browns. So it's going to be a tough 4 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can stash him and just wait it out, then you get the Bengals in the semifinals and the Dolphins in the championship. I really like to see that a lot. So I'm here to party with Jerry Jeudy. I really hope this is sticky. 5 catches, 70 yards in 3 straight games. Give me that each and every week.
Yeah, it's funny because we talk so much about matchups, and I'm also partying. And his matchups, it's Pittsburgh, Denver, Pittsburgh, Kansas City.
Denver, yeah.
Pittsburgh, Denver, Pittsburgh, Kansas City. So for the next few weeks, it should be actually pretty tough sledding. But the thing is, the Browns or Jameis Winston just throws the ball all over the place. I mean, Cedric Tillman had a down week, but he had 3 catches, but he had 8 targets. Elijah Moore had 8 targets. Like, everyone's getting targets right now. And so I think that when you have that potential volume on a team like the Browns, who are terrible and will not be playing with leads, and, Nick Chubb has not been efficient since coming back, like, the Browns are just going to have a lot of passing attempts. And I think that is what you're chasing here. So yeah, I'm partying with Jerry Jeudy and honestly with probably Tillman in some spots too. Like I think there's a lot of volume there for you.
Yeah, I definitely think that Tillman's also fine. It just that feels like that's who everybody wants to talk about.
Right.
Instead of Tillman. When Judy's just been the steady Eddie and finally gets the big play this past week. And this week you might have to play him. And I'm not going to be as confident in playing him against the Steelers, but you might have to. And like you said, if Jameis is going to throw the ball 40 times, then maybe he breaks off a big one. And that's going to feel really good.
Yep.
All right. Tight end here, our last one. Speaking of tight ends, David Njoku has also been good. Yeah, David Njoku he was one of those guys last year that helped you win your leagues. He went off the last couple weeks of the season. So look for that, hopefully again. But Jonnu Smith, let's say we were going to talk about him again today. Tight end 3 on the week, 6 catches, 101 yards, 2 touchdowns. If you don't follow the Coach Speak Index on Twitter, you should follow them on Twitter. He was all over this. McDaniel this past week kept talking about getting Jonnu more involved in this offense. And according to the Coach Speak Index, when McDaniel says things like this, he means it. And it showed up once again this week with tight end 3 on the week. Josh, are you going to party or pass on Jonnu Smith?
Yeah, I'm going to party with Jonnu Smith for sure. I was wrong about him earlier in the year. I think there was one of our shows where he was one of my sits, and I was looking at, I think it's a flash in the pan. I think it's a little bit of an anomaly, but he's had 6 targets in 5 of his last 6 games. Like, he has a really nice floor volume that we look for. And again, this is with the Miami offense is kind of a quote unquote full strength. I'm sure there are dings and injuries, but Tyreek's there, Waddle's there, Achan's there, Mostert's there, and he's still a part of it. So that's a really good sign going forward. And so I like the offense, and I like that he's been a focal point to an extent. And so if your tight end's getting 6 targets, you're in good shape. And so I'm partying for sure.
Yeah, I think he's going to continue to be in this offense, and I think the offense can continue to need him really to be a part of that. So I'm going to party as well. Don't expect top 5 every single week from him, but I think he's going to be a viable starter for you.
Yep.
Rest of the season, week in and week out. All right, that brings us to our last segment of the show, our starts and sits for week 12. This is the best opportunity to get involved with the show. Go ahead and jump in the chat. If you're over on Twitter, on X, thank you so much for tuning in. Come on over to YouTube, Okay, come to YouTube, and then you can throw your stuff in the chat. You can ask questions, start sit questions. We'd much appreciate it. Just come on over to YouTube and join us in the chat for this segment. Even if it's just for the next 20 minutes, join us on YouTube so you can ask your start sits questions for this week. This is a big week. We got to get this week right for playoff implications. And with all the buys, so many big names on buys this week, we have to get this week right. We'll start at quarterback. Josh, I will start, and I'm going to go start Bo Nix. I'm going to sit CJ Stroud. I told you earlier I was going to talk about CJ Stroud.
Yep.
But let's start with Bo Nix first against this Las Vegas Raiders team. Nix has been looking phenomenal the last couple of weeks. He doesn't use his legs as much as it feels like he does. But I think it's a lot more pocket presence. He's very good at maneuvering in the pocket. So we're not really getting a rushing floor from him, but he's still looking awesome. He's in a great spot this week against the Las Vegas Raiders. Look for Bo Nix to end up as a top 12 quarterback. But CJ Stroud, on the other hand, not so much. We talked about him early on in the night. I think he's arguably the most underrated bust of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Like if we do a show at the end of the year and we talk about busts of the year, he has to be talked about. He was drafted as the 6th or 5th or 6th, 7th quarterback, and he's only been a QB1 twice this season.
Yeah.
Out of 11 weeks, he's only been a top 12 quarterback twice. He's got Tennessee this weekend. Might be the toughest matchup for quarterbacks in the league. They're running the ball so efficiently. The Texans are playing great. CJ Stroud is playing great. But for fantasy football, he's really been very underwhelming. And I think that we just need to understand that. And 12 weeks into the season, it's time to go ahead and put him on the bench.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's hard to believe because it was so prolific last year. We thought, and their division is so bad and they're winning it, but they're not winning it by putting up a ton of points in the passing game. So I'm with you there. I've been trying to predict the downfall of Bo Nix, and it still has not happened. So I might as well jump on board. Yes, go start Bo Nix everywhere. The Raiders are terrible, so that's reason enough.
That always helps.
For my start and sit, I tried to go a little bit more obscure for anyone who is really like scraping the barrel, like Lee mentioned earlier. Maybe, and it's a little bit easier at quarterback because there's less that you have to roster. But I don't mind a Drake May start this week, which is a little bit, maybe a little bit not the best advice, I guess. But he threw 40 passes last week and completed 30 of them. He had 18 fantasy points. I think he's starting to develop some rapport with Kendrick Bourne and Kayshon Butte. And so I think the Patriots have something going here. It's not pretty. It's not perfect. This would not be I wouldn't say he's a top 12 guy necessarily, but if you are struggling from Byemaggedon, maybe you have maybe you have 2 quarterbacks that are on bye, unfortunately, and just it hit the wrong way. I think you can do a lot worse than Drake May. I think he's shown at times he can run. So this is a very fringe starter, fringe streaming option if you're desperate. They get Miami, Miami's not the worst defense against quarterbacks, but they've given up over 20 points at least a few times to opposing quarterbacks. So I think they'll be leading the game. So I think the Patriots will have to be throwing it quite a bit. And then I feel like I've used Patrick Mahomes' name a lot this year, and I just can't put my finger on it, but feels like a trap game. And I know people who've played fantasy all year know that he's not been a great start at quarterback for fantasy purposes. So it's not breaking any news there, but I feel like people are going to see Carolina and see, okay, this is a game where everyone goes off, everyone does well. They haven't been terrible against quarterbacks, and they haven't been as terrible as they were at the start of the year. I feel like a little bit of a trap game, and I think Kareem Hunt's going to run all over them. And I think, I still think he's going to struggle to get to 20 points. I don't know. It's very weird. But when I'm looking at guys that I would consider starting that aren't necessarily, in that top 12 consistently, his name keeps popping up. So I don't mean to rag on your quarterback too much, Trevor, but
no, I actually am full agreement, and I will talk about the wide receivers as well. So I have the Kansas City wide receivers written down for a similar point. I do think there is a world where they come out and they use this game as like not a get right game, because I mean they're 9-1. Let's be honest, like we don't.
Right,
It's not a get,
right.
but I could see a world where they utilize this game and to try a few things, right? Maybe it's a few new routes with DeAndre Hopkins. Maybe it's doing something with Xavier Worthy to kind of see how it works, and see if it's something that they like. I could see that a little bit, but no, I fully agree. I think this is you run the damn ball and you play great defense and you go home. Like you just get it over with. I think that's kind of like an old school, like just run the ball. So
Nice.
I don't disagree with you there. Lee said that Bo Nix is a comp to Herbert. I think that I don't know if he's going to be I don't know if it's a comp to Herbert, but I do think that what I thought of when I read that comment is that I think we could have legitimate conversation at the end of this season. Maybe it's an off-season crossover with like the necessary roughness guys. Let's talk about Bo Nix and Drake May and Jaden Daniels, of course.
Yeah.
But let's talk about these rookie quarterbacks because they have had great success, in my opinion.
Yeah.
This year. I really think they've had great success. Caleb Williams has obviously taken some lumps here and there.
Right.
Kind of in a completely different situation than the other three. But man, these guys have looked good. And I just a real conversation around like, who would you rather have as your quarterback and what does it look like for fantasy in the future? Right. Obviously not for tonight, but I do think that these quarterbacks have really played pretty good this season for rookies.
Yep.
And none of them are in great spots. I mean, obviously they're all drafted high, so you don't come in. Not everybody can be Joe Burrow when you come into a team who was already had good talent around them, just a really bad year.
Right.
All right, let's go to our running back start and sits of the week.
Yeah, so I'll start this one off. I like the Pittsburgh running backs this week. I like Najee as a start at RB2, and I even like Jalen Warren as a flex option. These guys aren't going to be super exciting. They don't put up the 30-point games or anything like that, but the volume is there. The volume is consistent. They get the Browns. I know it's Thursday night. Those always feel weird from trying to find offensive production, but I mean, Najee Harris has at least 21 touches in his last 4 games. That's really good volume at this day and age. And he's been running it really well. And Jalen Warren's had over 10. I think he's right around 11 the last few games at least, and he gets all the passing game stuff. And so, he's got a consistent role, so he's going to get some touches. So if you're looking for the floor of somebody consistent with your RB2 or a flex, I think both those guys are viable this week. Maybe not the most exciting picks, but if you're looking at fringe guys, for sure. And then my sit is I'm not really excited about Tony Pollard this week. Tajay Spears is questionable. We talked about his concussion protocol, and that might lead you to think, okay, there should be more opportunities for Pollard, which I would agree with, but they have the Texans. It's going to be tough sledding, and this Titan offense is sketchy at best sometimes. So, excuse me, I apologize for my voice. Could have done that earlier. I'm really raspy tonight, but even with that kind of setup, I just don't like the Titans offense to do a whole lot, especially in the ground game. So I'm not starting Tony Pollard, even if Tajay Spears is out, or I'm not feeling good about it if I have to.
Yeah, the Texans allow the 7th fewest fantasy points per game to running backs. So I like that call, whether or not Spears is in the game this week. I am going with start Bucky Irving and sit J.K. Dobbins. Bucky Irving, he kind of started to come on a little bit, but then prior to the bye, or prior to that actually, but then right before the bye week, he started to not be as involved as Rachaad White. And I think all of that was game script dependent. They were losing those games. White is clearly going to be the passing down back. But this week, you get a bad Giants team. I think Tampa Bay leads the whole game, which means Bucky's going to get plenty of opportunities, and you can put him right back in your lineups. Tampa Bay has really started to show a clear, this Bucky is the guy who's going to run between the tackles. Rashad White's going to be the pass catching back. J.K. Dobbins, I'm going to say sit on him because this is a really tough matchup with the Ravens. We know how bad this Ravens defense is from a passing standpoint. But against the run, they've actually been pretty solid this year. Pretty tough matchup. Jim Harbaugh loves to run the ball. John Harbaugh defense stuffs the run. You really have to throw against them to get here. I think that's going to lessen the opportunities for J.K. Dobbins. I think Herbert will probably throw 25 to 30 times in this game, if not more. And just J.K. Dobbins just not going to have the volume that we're used to with this Chargers team. So if you can, obviously, I would say sit J.K. Dobbins this week.
Yeah, and I like both those calls. J.K. Dobbins last week against the Bengals, who actually have a relatively decent running defense, his fantasy week was salvaged by that last-minute game-winning touchdown that he scored. And, he earned it. It was a great run, but we were waiting to the very end for him to get over 10 PPR points. Otherwise, it would have been a really pedestrian game for him. And I love the Bucky Irving call. I think that was
so weird. That was the Bengals, man. They're so bad.
Yeah.
But they're so good at the same. Like, I don't know, man. How do you?
They're a very strange team.
So strange. Lee said he expected me to have two large tears when I came on tonight. Look, you win some, you lose some. Josh Allen is really good. We all know that. But let's be honest. We'll see what happens in January in Arrowhead. I'm going to move on to wide receiver, and my start of the week is opposite J.K. Dobbins. My start of the week is Ladd McConkey, the pass catcher there in Los Angeles. And my sit of the week is going to be the Kansas City Chiefs wide receivers. You already alluded to a lot of it with your Patrick Mahomes take. I will talk a little bit about it as well. But Ladd McConkey, what could go wrong when you're starting Ladd? I started him, I think it was like a couple weeks ago. I said start him, and he didn't do very well. Yeah, and then the weeks I don't say start him, he does well. But just mention this Ravens defense. The Chargers going to have to throw the ball if they're going to win this game. Ladd has been a PPR machine. And then Byemaggedon week, he's worth a start. The Chiefs wide receivers, on the other hand, if you might have to, you might just be in a situation where you have to start DeAndre Hopkins. But I'm going to sit them if I can. I just expect a really run-heavy game here. I expect a lot of Kareem Hunt. Maybe you get a couple end-arounds with like a Xavier Worthy. Maybe Mecole Hardman gets an end-around or two. I think Travis Kelce will be fine. You're going to have to start him. It's a different situation. But as far as DeAndre Hopkins and Xavier Worthy go, if I have the opportunity to set them, I'm going to set them this week.
Yeah, for sure. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think, Ladd McConkey's just great. He's going to be great. It's just kind of right now, he's trying to feel out which weeks he's going to be there when he gets consistent. Cause I think he's got the capabilities.
Lee says Chargers are going to win. I'm excited for the game itself.
Yeah.
That's going to be a heck of a ball game.
Yeah, for sure. I hope there's a lot of points to be had as it looks like on paper. So for my wide receiver starts and sits, I'm starting Jameson Williams for Detroit. And I'm going to put this in air quotes. This is the start him for upside if your other flex options are RBs with bad matchups, if that makes sense. He's still very boom busty. He's still very, he needs some of those deep touchdowns, but I feel like it's starting to click with them. They have the Colts this week, and I think they're going to be able to throw on those guys. So I like Jameson Williams, but again, for an upside pick, I'm not saying he's your wide receiver too. I'm saying he's in flex category, especially if you need to make a stand. You're going up against a good team, good record, and you're trying to get into the playoffs. Like Jameson Williams is a guy I want to play when I'm chasing some points a little bit. So I thought he would be a fun start. And I think when the Lions are just dismantling people, I mean, they've put up 50 points twice in the past 5 weeks. Like, so it's not that outlandish to predict a 40-yard touchdown Jameson Williams and then another like 4 catches after that. So So I like Jameson Williams for my start.
I mean, they don't care. They'll beat your brakes off 52-6 and just keep throwing.
Right, exactly.
I can't believe they threw as much as they did in that game. I distinctly remember sending a text message to one of my friends, like, what? Why are they still throwing? And in fact, I was playing against Amon-Ra St. Brown. Actually, I know exactly who I sent the text to. So I'm like, why are they still throwing to this guy? Like, why is he not on the bench? It's the fourth quarter, man. They don't care.
They needed to practice after that 5 interception game from Goff against the Texans. So my sits, I have kind of a cheat one, so I have 2. I'm sitting my guy Jordan Addison. You probably already were sitting him. I think he's only ranked at like wide receiver 41. But he had the nice touchdown, so I don't want people to get too excited. We haven't spread the ball around to him as much as we would have liked this year, and we haven't been quite as prolific, I think. Jefferson's obviously an insta start, but the tight ends are coming on, and I don't think you can trust Addison unless he scores a touchdown. But if that is too obvious, I also threw in Jacoby Myers. We've talked about this Raiders team. We've talked about their matchup with the Broncos. He's been a consistent starter for a lot of people this year because of the target volume he gets. I'm just really not feeling any Raiders playmakers this week at all. And so I would throw Jacoby Myers into the sit list as well.
I don't mind that. I played him in DFS last week, and he failed me. Lee says he's starting Kyler Murray over Goff this week. Don't mind that. I mean, against Seattle, in a really must-win game for both teams. I mean, not must-win, but a very important game for both teams. So I don't mind that whatsoever. We are going to get into tight ends, which means this is your last opportunity to send in any start-sit questions you may have. Again, thank you for being with us. Hit the like button if you haven't already. If you're on Twitter watching, thank you, or X. I still call it Twitter, man. Yeah, if you're on X and watching, retweet it, repost it, whatever it's called, and hit a like button. Just get us a little bit more visible on X as well. We appreciate you, no matter where you're watching from. Start sit of the week from tight end. Josh, I'll let you start it.
Yeah, Will Dissly. He's my guy. He's one of Herbert's go-tos right now. He got his first touchdown. He's been getting
great.
He's been getting a ton of targets. Like, they have the Ravens this week. Again, I'm predicting a lot of passing from Herbert. And if he's passing a lot, Johnson might get some, and Palmer might get some. Lad McConkey, obviously, we talked about him, but I think Dissly is going to be a pretty big stalwart for Herbert rest of the season. So, and again, I'll remind everybody that I was going to pick him up in one league, but I started Dawson Knox instead, and I lost by half a point. So we're not bitter.
One more time for the people.
One more time.
It happens to all of us. We all make the bad. We all start Kyle Pitts instead of Taysom Hill.
That's right. That's right. My sit's kind of interesting. I'm sitting Hunter Henry, and that seems like he goes against conventional wisdom. He's been relatively consistent without relying on touchdowns from a target standpoint. But I already mentioned Drake May earlier. Miami's is actually pretty good against tight ends for fantasy purposes. And so I'm a little worried about the matchup there. And I do think that May is going to keep spreading it more and more to his wide receivers. A little bit more of a hunch than specific, like conventional fantasy advice. So I want to make sure I offer that disclaimer. I don't feel a big game for Hunter Henry. Again, his floor is probably going to be what it usually is. So he's going to probably get you at least 8 or 9 PPR points. But again, in crunch time, trying to go into the playoffs, I don't know if that's going to be enough for me. So I might look elsewhere for someone who I think has a better matchup. It is kind of where I'm going with that. So.
Absolutely there. I am going to go start Zach Ertz, and no one is going to be excited about doing this. Nobody's going to feel great. Nobody's going to be like, heck yeah, I got Zach Ertz as my starting tight end. But we've alluded to it all night long. No Kyle Pitts, no Evan Ingram, no Taysom Hill, no Kincaid, no Mike Gesicki. The tight end position was already pretty thin, and now it's even more thin without some of these other guys. That, to me, leads you to a guy like Zach Ertz, who you might just need to start. I have Kyle Pitts and Taysom Hill in a league. Yep. I got to figure out what I'm going to do at tight end this week. If Zach Ertz was available, I would feel more comfortable starting him than other tight ends. I guess it would be the idea behind that, right?
Right. Yeah, it makes sense.
And then I'm going to talk about Sam Laporta, and I put him as my sit, but I don't want you to actually sit Sam Laporta if he is playing, especially not in a week like this. But I don't know if he's actually healthy. Before the game last week, Sam Laporta was questionable for week 12. Like they were already past week 11. They're like, we don't even know if this guy's going to play next week. Right. I did see some reports before our show. I was doing some more digging. It did seem like it was a positive day today, and he could be trending back into playing. But this is more just to put it on your all's radar. If you have Sam Laporta, he's got the Q tag, and you're like, oh, it's fine, he's playing. Everybody has a Q tag these days.
Right.
Like, go find another tight end to pick up and put him on your bench for this week. Or maybe you don't want to pick him up right now, but at least identify who you would go pick up should he not play come Sunday morning when inactives come out. Because I do think that the Lions are not playing for week 12, y'all. Like, they're playing for a Super Bowl. And if he is not 100% healthy, they're not going to rush him back just to rush him back. There could be an opportunity. Like, there could be a potentially where you're missing him on top of all these guys on a bye. So that's why I wanted to bring up Sam Laporta this week.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then if you're like me, who drafted him as the first overall tight end in the ADP league and is just so nervous that he's going to have his big breakout week when I finally decide to bench him, I'm also starting him as well, unless he's injured, right? If he's, I'll have some contingency plans in place, but I'm starting him with confidence. This is the week if he's playing.
3 weeks ago, I said sit him. I was over it. He was not scoring, and then he did have his breakout game. And you didn't take my advice. Smart man.
That's right.
Smart man.
No, he's been so frustrating this year. So frustrating.
Oh yeah, for sure. And like on a week like this, you have to, if he is in and available, you have to start him. Like he has to be in your lineup. Yeah. Unless you just are somehow you bully tight end, you've got Travis Kelce and Sam Laporta. Like if it's something like that, but you're playing him if he's healthy, but just keep an eye on him. All right, I think that will do it for this week's episode. Josh, a pretty decent show. Week 12 is going to be a big one. Again, before I throw it to Josh, next week, same time, same place, maybe even a little earlier, we're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to run through a lot of things. We'll talk a lot of betting stuff. We'll talk some fantasy football stuff. We'll definitely still help you prepare for week 13, but the vibes will be different. We're going to be chilling. We're going to be getting ready for Thanksgiving. We're going to have our Thanksgiving Eve fantasy football, bite-sized sports show, whatever we want to call it. But we've been doing it for a couple of years in a row now. Last year it was a lot of fun, and I expect a lot of fun this year. That's going to be one that you can just kick your feet up and relax and really let loose a little bit. Not as buttoned up as our shows are each and every week. So that'll be a fun one. Make sure you join us right back here on Twitter, on Twitch, on X, on Twitch, on YouTube, wherever you watch us. Make sure you are right back here next Wednesday night. Josh, where can the people find you?
Yeah, find me on X or whatever at JLime8. That's where you can interact if you want. Otherwise, just right now we're just focused on ADP. And then my friend Simon and Friends podcast. He puts out great shows every Thursday as well. So give a shout out there. Yeah, please come to next week on Wednesday because Thanksgiving Day is one of my favorite DFS days.
Oh yeah.
I'm going to put a handful of lineups together. And so I'd love to see the chat firing off. Like I'd rather start this stack, or I want to see these guys in this game. We'll definitely get you ready for week 13, but yeah, like Trevor said, come hang out, come share with, just get the Thanksgiving football fun started off early, because that's what makes Thanksgiving great. So that's right. Get to eat all day and get to watch football all day.
That's right. My wife, every time I tell her why Thanksgiving is my favorite, she's like, "You literally do that every Sunday." I'm like, "Yeah, but it's just different. It's different on Thanksgiving, right? Eat all day and watch football all day." Yeah, maybe we'll build some lineups on stream. We'll build some parlays on stream. Like, we're just gonna have a lot of fun. So be right back here. Follow me on X at Trevor_FF. Follow Bite Size Sports on X at Bite_Size Sports. Hit that subscribe button over on YouTube. If you watched us on X tonight, thank you for being here. Jump over to YouTube next time, or come on over and hit that subscribe button if you will. We appreciate all of you. See you all next week. And until then, may the winning be in your favor.
I need to know everything, who and the what and the where, I need everything. Trust me, I hear what you're saying, but act like it's new what you're telling me. I'm curious, George, I hop in the Porsche, 5 and a horse, I'm ready for war, I'm coming for throats, to turn to a ghost, I need to know everything. Now you be surprised at the info you get is by letting them talk, so I'm letting them